Hi, good afternoon.
Hi Rama, hi
Hi,
Anil,
Nicole. Hi.
everybody.
Hi.
Hello, can you hear me?
Hi Drew.
Oh, good.
Yes,
Great. Hey, thanks. Whenever I jump to a new thing, I'm not sure if my computer's going to pick the right audio source. It's like frantically trying to fix it. So we'll give people a little while. Do we? We don't have your guest yet. So while we wait for Yogesh, we have kind of two topics we're working through right now. One is the CPAL proposal, and we asked for feedback, and I see that a lot of people have put feedback in, so that's great. We need to go through that. The other thing we need to do is finish the in-band discussion, and so Anil, we had made progress there, but you were out for a little while, and so we kind of paused because uh, we knew we'd just have to go back over it with you. So now that you're back, we should probably pick that up again. So I was going to propose what we're seeing about CPALs is that we want to tie them in with the RAS API. I've been talking to folks. And so maybe what we do is we ratify the proposal here, and then we go to the RAS API folks and say, hey, RAS API folks, when we're doing actions, this is the format of the action we're going to send back to you, assuming we end up agreeing that we like CPALs, and we'll keep you all in the loop, and anyone that wants to join the RAS API is certainly welcome to, and then we can focus on the in-band stuff for a little while here. But if there's another way to do it, I don't. It's fine with me, and I'll put the link to the doc for your convenience in the chat.
Sounds good to me.
Yeah,
Okay.
that sounds good to me as well. I guess just one question on the CPAL, Drew. Were you thinking that, like, we kind of get the proposed content here and then work out the format in the RAS API, like the specifics of the format and stuff in the RAS API working group?
Yeah. And
Yeah.
and like maybe even we just say, okay, we agree with the general idea, and
Yep.
then we'll go cook it a little bit more in the RAS API. And we need to come back here a little bit more often and say, hey, are we on the right track? Are we on the right track? And get feedback. But I'll get on my knees and beg you to join the RAS API discussions too. That is big. It is big and important. So anyway, Vilas, does that make sense to you?
Yeah, it makes sense to me. I don't know enough about OCP logistics to know if there's any, like things we got to watch out for in that, but I agree with the general sort of thought process.
Well, let's try it. We'll keep what we can do is we can keep the OCP leadership in the loop and get guidance. And I can work with Yogesh to get the appropriate guidance. So if that works. All right. So Do we have anyone new this week? I'm trying to, that's another thing I thought we should probably do. Okay. Uh, Sounds good. Welcome back, Heinz. Heinz has been here from Google a few times. So thank
Hello.
you. Yeah, always good to hear your voice, Heinz.
Yeah,
Thanks
good
for
to see you,
joining.
Drew.
Okay. Well, so it sounds like we're agreed. I'm gonna pop the CPAL proposal up, and if we could just go through it, I'd like to kind of go through it quickly, and then uh, Anil, maybe towards the end of the meeting, if we can, jump to the N-band discussion, uh, so that you can kind of queue up what we want to do next week and where we're picking up. We had gone through the first few sections, but uh, I think we really just urgently need to get the N-band stuff behind us. I mean, I'm not saying it's not important. I'm saying let's just nail it and get it done. Um, so hopefully that makes sense to you.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Okay. So there were some changes Suke suggested, and and for the most part, where I understood them, I just accepted them. Suke, it looked good. Thank you very much. Um, One thing that I
There's no
not
problem.
what you meant was right here, by consistency, and I'm not pushing back. I'm not sure exactly what you meant. So would you mind explaining?
Yeah, I think in this case, I was debating between standards or standardization, but yeah, it wasn't a really like a hard push there. I was trying to think about what made more sense. So I don't know. It doesn't. It's not a hard um a suggestion there.
Okay. Okay. Well, I mean, if your opinion changes, let us know. Otherwise, I'm gonna take the path of least resistance and leave it. Um, but I'm happy for feedback. So next up is, I'm gonna stretch this window a little so we can see more of the comment. So um, let's see. Propose a comment format for the output. And so I see the common format will help classify. It makes it easier to classify the failures. Is what you're saying?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. I'm going to say more readily. I don't know.
That works.
Okay, I follow you now. I just wanted to ask if that's what you meant. Um, okay. I think I did make a change to this recently where I added repair automation, because that is absolutely one of the things the analyzers might tell us is it's broken, replace it. So we got that for completeness. Um, and I took a bunch of feedback and just accepted the changes because they all made sense. So. And oh, and it looks like I missed some of yours, Suke. So let's see. Yeah, I agree. Associated data. Yeah. And name, ID of the failure makes sense. Um, and absolutely, the beauty of these failure IDs is I'm going to call somebody. I'm going to go be like, hey, VLOS, I got this error on an AMD processor. What does it mean? And if I go to VLOS with the name of an error, an ID of an error, that will really help him. My mom calls me all the time, Drew, my computer broke. Something about, you know, update this software. I'm like, what software was it? I don't know. Thanks, mom. So we don't want to do that. So I love the idea of an ID. Um, Failure severity, absolutely. That makes sense. Okay. And so for folks, I'm just going to go through the feedback to make this quick. And if you see something that you want to speak up about, speak up. But I'm not going to be that slow. I'm really going just comment to comment.
Yeah, so I had a quick question on that. The name of the failure, what was it? The name of the failure? Like, yeah. Isn't that in the steeper? Maybe I'm misunderstanding the intent.
No, I mean, the name of the failure is not always in the CPER. The CPER, um, and I'll give you an example, Vilas. Um, I had a corrected memory error. I had a corrected memory error. I had a corrected memory error. Wait a minute, that's a bad main word line. So the name of the failure is bad main word line.
I see. I understand. Okay. Yeah. What is this repair action trying to fix? No, I got it. Okay.
Is it an ad hoc text string, or are you going to define sets of failures?
I'm inclined. I mean, because the structure of chips is so different, it's kind of hard for it to be anything but an ad hoc. I mean, maybe we can come up with some standard names, but I wouldn't over rotate on it. I think as long as AMD uses the same name in every chip for the same failure, then it may be the best we can do. But maybe we can do better. I don't know.
So it's kind of just an eye catcher for some human who actually sees the CPAL and says, "Oh, I know what this is trying to accomplish, whether it
Yeah.
works or not." Okay.
Another way to think of it too, though, is that I could say, well, okay, when the Texas Instruments voltage regulator analyzer tells me this error, I know it's pretty good at it, so I'm just going to take its action at face value. But when this other company's analyzer gives me another different name, my experience says that I do what they tell me to, and it doesn't fix the problem. In fact, sometimes it makes it worse. So I'm going to filter that one out. So it also allows you to, it allows us to talk to you about it, but it also allows us to filter out ones that we find aren't effective.
But Drew, I have comment. Didn't
Sure.
we decide that to be the optional error log that goes along with the CPAL? Because name or ID of the failure, it may not be directly related to the action that you are trying to do, right? So I think we discussed that and we put that as a linked
So
list of CPAL, like you have the section below which says
actually,
optional.
I think it's the other way around, Shibata. So the actions will be enumerated and they'll be pretty common. But the name of the failure is hypercritical here because you might tell me to take an action, replace the CPU, and you might have some cases where I feel like you get it right and we want to just do it. And there'll be other cases where I'm like, wait a minute, there's an extenuating circumstance here that I know about. I don't want to do that. So actually having the name of the failure is critical here.
And I mean, I
So
would
like
also
memory versus PCIe, is that what you're saying? Like say memory failure, and
No,
that's why
I
I'm
mean-
taking this action? Or
So Shibata, no, I mean, Drew explained it pretty well, right? Like an action implies that there's a potential either root cause or through ID. Like there's a reason to take that action, right? And so it's that. So like Drew's example was pretty good. It's corrected error, corrected error, corrected error, corrected error, all of which are CPERs. Diagnosis is, row failure, action is PPR, but the name of the failure is, DRAM row failure, right?
Exactly.
right. Okay.
Right. So I mean that kind of high level makes sense.
And if you
the
told me,
data
if you
related
gave
to
me,
that is the CPERs, right? Like because that's what will really indicate that you were seeing corrected errors.
well, the
Correct.
corrected error, but you have to find a pattern in them to know what to do about it. So, and if you told me CPU cache corrected error, do a PPR, I'd be like, oh, no, no, sorry, that doesn't make any sense. So,
Got it.
like having the name of the error and the action is a good cross check. It's a good way for us to talk to you about the failure mode that you've discovered. And we want to talk to you about analysis results and the quality of your results to make them as good as we can so that everyone benefits from it. And the only way we can do that is if we associate the name of the failure with the action that you want us to take. And then we can say, when we see a main word line failure, you give us a great action. PPR, that works, and 99.9% of the time that makes the memory problem go away. We love it. Thank you. Or it may be when you tell us, this is a main word line failure, it's really a bank failure. And can we put something in your chip to help us see some of the other errors in the bank?
So Drew, you might want to say description of failure, because name or ID implies to me some rigid structure. So it's kind of it's a description, right?
Yeah, it's a description. Although, like but the problem is if I'm writing filters, I want you to use the name consistently within yourself, so that I can filter your messages from your products consistently.
Yeah, that's reasonable. But then that means you have another namespace to define.
Yeah, it's an identity provided by the by the analyzer. You know,
Yeah. And maybe just a terminology thing, right? I think it's important that we say either failure or fault with this, not error, right? Like what you said, Drew, is like you take a stream of errors, you diagnose what your fault hypothesis is or what the failure is, and that's what you're putting here. Right.
Exactly. And I do have the word failure here, so
Yep, no, exactly.
I'm happy to change it to fault if you prefer that.
Failure is fine. We should just consistently make sure that we use those terms. Sorry, we
Thank
should
you.
make sure we use those terms consistently.
I agree with you. I agree. And when you get a CPER, that is an error, and that error has a name. But then when you analyze that error, you come to some conclusion about what the root cause for that error was. And sometimes they're one for one, you know, that I had an uncorrected error in an SRAM in a chip, and that's just all there is to it, and it's a broken chip. And so, you know, the error and the fault are the same. But other cases, we have to do analysis. We have to look for patterns and try to figure things out. And that's really the value of having the word failure here. Yeah, but I'm with you, Bila. I agree with you.
So in terms of defining this namespace, should it not be part of a interface specification, because analyzers will be from different vendors and they might not convert. So putting that onus on analyzer instead.
Well, the problem is that you know, like one chip might have a DMA accelerator, and another chip might have a DMA accelerator, compression accelerator. So we're not going to. This is basically along the same principle of CPERS. CPERS describe errors; these describe failures, and the suppliers will structure their description of their failures according to how they design their chip, and we're not trying to tell people how to design their chip. So while it would be nice to have some consistency, I think that's just a nice to have. I would rather have really good, accurate failure names from the vendors. Do you follow what I'm saying?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the work SESP has to do, again, there's a bunch of interpretation that's vendor specific rather than more standardized,
Well,
right?
but what it becomes is a file that says when I get this ID, I I have some sort of confidence in that ID from the supplier, and I either do it or I don't. And so that's actually fairly straightforward as long as the suppliers use the names and IDs consistently. And that's important because like, are we going to try to say hypertransport and QPI links use the same set of failure names? That doesn't smell right to me because they're different. They're different links and they have different characteristics. So,
and I don't think we have to rat hole here, right? Like if you go look at CPER definitions or whatever, there's a bunch of standard ones. Like, you know, you define some amount of space and you say, here's a bunch of standard ones, and then the rest is vendor specific. Like there's ways to deal with this, right? So
yeah. Okay, and I just want to leave room for the vendor specific ones because we want it to be really, really fine tuned and really precise and you know, accurate, and that's going to require some proprietary understanding of the chip.
So this discussion kind of makes me think that maybe we should have a version field somewhere in the CPAL, because it's going to be an evolving thing, sounds like, and having like a field which tells you which version you're working with can allow like for the, you know, your pipelines to ingest things in different ways.
Yeah, I guess it might be vendor specific version, but I think that makes sense. Or maybe there's a macro version too.
I think I would say we should have a global version. That's a really good point, right?
Okay.
Because like the formatting might change, right? The content
Exactly.
can change without the version changing, right? But if the formatting changes, that's an important version update, right?
Yep.
Okay. Okay. That's good. Thank you, Mita.
One other thing, are you really tied to the name CPAL?
Do you have a better name?
I mean, I don't know if it's better, but like, how about Common Platform Action Descriptor?
CPAD?
CPAD.
It doesn't matter. I really don't care. It just doesn't matter to me.
Yeah, actually log doesn't make sense, right? but I was okay with it. But this is not
Yeah,
really a
yeah,
log,
it is
right?
not
It
a
is
log.
really a
I think
request
it is
to do the
record.
action.
I think
Yeah.
action recorder maybe like log.
Well, we said that. We started actually, Vilas and I started with CPAR,
Yeah.
Common Platform Action Record. But the problem is it sounds just like CPAR, CPAR.
Oh.
That's why I
So
was suggesting descriptor.
I like that.
Yeah,
I
like
mean,
descriptor, yeah.
okay, I'm going to, if people are okay with it, that's a great suggestion. I'm going to run with it and I'll go fix the doc later. Anyone object?
Nope. Yeah. Yeah. Log is not good. That's good. Thanks.
Yeah. No, I just put log in because I didn't want to call it like the record. So descriptor is awesome. CPAD.
Hey, Drew, I have a crazy idea.
Okay.
Which I think you're going to shut me down, but I'm going to stay anyway. If you look at the CPAR format today, what is suppose we add a field which is analyzed output, and so basically you go through CPAR with decoding, and then the same CPAR record get updated with this new field. Field was already there, but it was null before, after the analysis, and that's about it. You don't really need to define a new format for this CPAR concept.
Yeah, Peter and I were talking. Like I think Peter mentioned that down below, and it's like, hey, how do you associate the CPERs? And so the problem is, so there are a few problems with that. One is the thing we talked about earlier, that this is an analysis result, this is a fault, not an error. So CPER is an error record. This is trying to say, I have figured out what the fault is, and I'm going to take action. So there's not a one-to-one mapping of CPER to CPADs. The other problem is that when we pipe them back to the machine, it'd be nice if I don't have to pack up a whole bunch of extra data. So let's say it's a crash dump record that's 10 megabytes, and we analyze it, and we figure out what it is, and we're like, hey, if you turn this thing off and swap this spare core in, you can make everything better. And so we want to do that, but I don't want to pass the crash dump back to the machine. I just want to have a thing that says, do this action. Here, go. So I hear you, but I think it, and so it could be a CPER format, but it isn't the CPER record. And I'm a little worried because CPER is error record, and this is really an action thing.
I mean, that's just
Also,
a
the
naming.
initiator is different, right? Like you're coming from the other end to request this action. So
Yeah.
No, I mean, I think we are going. Maybe I'm going to. The actual action comes out from this analysis output is independent of the CPAL. I mean, that is going to be hyperscaler specific. Okay. I think what we're defining here is the output of the analysis and the standardization of the format. That's it.
Yes.
How does it plumb back into the machine and all that? I don't think we are calling that out here, that formatting and all that. So that's going to be very hyperscaler specific.
It is, except for like we really don't want to send a crash dump back. I mean, why would I have to send a crash dump both directions?
No. So that's exactly what I'm trying to communicate, that we are not going to send a CPAL output itself the way it is, right? So we can take the CPAR.
Wait, sorry. Why not though, Anil? That maybe I'm missing what you're saying. Like, why wouldn't this CPAL output go directly back to the SoC?
Yeah, I think we, excuse me, we talked about, right? There is an additional checks and the rules applied.
Oh, sure. I mean, look at the example here. You absolutely have to have fleet policies, but it's just a matter of looking at it and going, hey, I know what the error this is. I know what the action is. Do I believe it? I can apply my policy. And if if it passes my policy check, then I send it back as is to the machine and it acts on it. So it's not I don't have to change it. I just filter it.
And I mean, just to be clear,
yeah,
if you wanted, you could change it, but just put your new thing in a CPAD format and send it back anyway. Right?
That's if you just want to try PPR for the fun of it, you can do it.
Yeah, whatever.
Anyway,
right?
I'm just thinking loudly here because to me, the
Thanks,
CPAR
Vita.
record, the CPAR record that we have, right? I think what is missing there is the analysis output. And if you just add that field, we pretty much have met our CPAD requirement. I still don't understand what is new in CPAD.
So CPER is an error record.
No, that's okay too. That's the terminology, right? We can define record the way we want, right? It could be error record or a failure record, or it's a record.
No, but I want a fault action. So this is a fault action, not an error record. So are you saying that the CPAD format could be the same as the CPER format, but it's a different thing. It's the analysis output, but it happens to look a lot like a CPER? Is that what you're saying?
All I'm saying is that we can just add another additional field to the. So in the CPAR, you have a header, right? And then you have this UIDs, how many events are there, and for each event there's a header and the log.
Or how many records are there,
Record.
right?
How many records, right? Yeah. And right after that, if you have another field, say this is the analysis output.
But again, the problem is that I can't. By the way, the Shibata, the link is at the top. Maybe if you missed it, I'll paste it again. But so again, Anil, I might have had 10 errors, but and then I realized what it is, and I have one action from them because I looked
exactly. Yeah. So that's fine. So the analysis output is just like another event record, but it is the analysis output record.
But Anil, you shouldn't presume that the analysis output is like one line, right? It's not, right? It could be do a row repair, do a hard repair, do it to this row, which is different than the address I got in the CPER, right? So
I think we are getting into semantics now. I'm just suggesting that rather than just getting yet another record definition, I mean, essentially we are doing a record definition.
So Neil, it's not that much trouble to define the new format. And it's actually more trouble to try to reuse the CPER format. It's not that much trouble. It's just it'll end up just being a structure or a set of structures that you build up. It's better than trying to overload the CPER, which has a completely different intent.
Not really. The record, the CPER record, the way it is at the internet, the way I read the spec, right, is there are errors happening, multiple errors happening. They may be related to the same fault. So how can I triangulate that to get to the fault? Get to the source of the fault. Source of the errors, right? That's the intent. That's why CPER has this concept of multiple events associated with the same failure.
Yeah, but that's not a time series. The example I was giving was a time series. So I got an error and it was on a row. I got another error. Oh, look, it was the same row address. Another corrected error. Oh, it's a row address. At some point, I'm gonna be like, for crying out loud, all my corrected errors appear to be on this row. It's a word line problem. I can now say the fault is a bad row. I'm gonna do a PPR. But you can't do that from one sample of memory, right? You don't know. You just know you got to correct. You have these flip bits, but it could be a column error at that point. You got to wait and see what the pattern is.
Yeah, no, that example is a good one because now you're talking about in time multiple CPER records, right? In that case, the new field, which we can call analysis field, is going to be blank or not available until we have collected enough CPER, and then at some point we populate that field. Say, okay, now there's
So I don't see, but again, I mean, if we leverage some of the format of CPER for CPAD, so be it. I mean, we kind of want to because the two have to mirror each other. We need some common fields because we want the same GUIDs to fly back and forth. But I'm kind of with Dean that it's better if we tune it for our purpose, and error records are pre-analysis notions that hardware has seen something unusual. An analysis result is, or an action descriptor is an analysis result where we think we've come up with the root cause fault and we have a mitigation for it. And that's a pretty substantially different purpose than saying, I saw an error.
I'm just seeing the trouble here because we have to do a lot of matching. Okay, these are all the CPER records we had, and then output, analysis output. Now it should be, it has to be some sort of back traceability. And
Well, that will be
Yep.
in your diagnosis tool, right? That won't be in these communications. That'll be in the diagnosis tool itself, and presumably it creates logs and messages.
Also, there's a field in the other section of the CPAD right now, which is a linked list of CPERs to point back to the errors that actually resulted in this
Yeah,
analysis.
that's where I was thinking through, Nita, and I thought, you know what, it's going to be even. It's not that easy. Okay, to like once you decouple the database, like CPER versus CPAL. See, this is one of the problems we are trying to solve to not have this. So in today's world, when we have cell logs and other type of logs, right? The hard part is to joining these different data sources.
Right.
CPER is helping us.
Exactly. But
CPER,
yes, but this is not joining sources. This is, and all you do in your infrastructure is you say, I got these errors, I got this action. And that is super simple because all you do is track for that machine that when you got this error, you got this action, and you plunk that in your database, and now you've got traceability. And if you go back in the future with a new analyzer and say, you know what, if I replay these old logs through, then what you do is you replay the logs through, and you can even go back and look in your database and you say, well, the new analyzer put this CPAD out. Did it match the CPAD I got out at the time? And that is easy to trace. This really works for that case, and you don't have to do crazy
yeah,
join.
maybe I'm not following completely. So anyway, I thought about it. I'm sitting here. I may be jumping the gun here, so I'm going to shut down right now. Let's continue with CPAD and yeah.
Okay, maybe we can talk offline, and I can try to understand what you're thinking, because I want to hear you, but I just don't see it. So maybe you can explain to me, and where we're not doing it with so many people. But and so this linked list of CPERs, or GUIDs for the CPERs, I'm like, I'm a little ambivalent to it. I guess if there's some traceability, but like I said, what I'm worried about is I don't want to. Let's say I had a corrected error and a crash dump, and so I have this small thing and a 10 megabyte thing, and I don't want to have to like embed those in the CPAD to send back. So no, but if I have some notion that the analyzer said, well, here are the some identifiers for the CPERs I used that are like GUIDs that uniquely identify CPER, great. I just don't want to pass all the raw data back to the machine. The machine already sent it. I just need to tell the machine what to do.
You actually probably need something like a, GUID or something, because how will you ever go back and find which one is associated with which without
Well,
something?
that's usually pretty easy because this will be a service that runs where you call it with a list of CPERs. I mean, what the analyzer would do, and I need to write this up, but it would look at the most recent error, and based on that error, it would decide, oh, is this one of those errors like a corrected memory error where a pattern helps me? And if it is, then it'll go back and look at the previous records. So the agent was given let's just say files for each of the records for the time being, and it looks at whatever files are interesting. So then it can just put out an action, but the key is that you're always doing it off the last CPER. So you know at least what that last CPER was that pushed you over the edge and made you decide you knew the fault, and you can easily correlate those. And if you take the same,
I don't know how can you correct? Can you walk me through how can you correlate that?
Oh, yeah. Hang on before you do that. So when you just so I'm clear, and I'm sorry, and I'll yield in a second. Just to clear it up in my mind, if you have a fleet, right, and you have like a lot of records that are coming in all the time, this represents a big number of CPADs that will probably get issued in any given moment, right? And so
I can speak to that. Yeah. Okay. So the flow looks something like this, right? You get some number of CPERs, and really, what will probably happen is that the analyzer says, "Give me the last X days of CPERs," and so every time we get a new CPER, we send the last X days of CPERs. And so, this is the last CPER. The analysis starts with that. But then if it needs to, it goes and looks at these. Now, all of these CPERs are stored in a database. So, and the key is, Jean, is that to make this a scalable, reliable thing that works at cloud scale, what we're going to have to do is have stateless analysis. So that means this analyzer isn't remembering this CPER from before, because that machine that the analyzer ran on when it analyzed this CPER when it was the newest might have been a month ago. That machine might have died and not be there anymore. So what we do as a cloud provider, we store all the CPERs we get from a machine. And whenever a machine sends a new CPER, we take however many days of CPERs we need, we send them to the analyzer. The analyzer looks at the last one, based on the newest CPER, decides what else it needs to look at, and comes up with a CPAD. And now, these are already in a database. So all we do is we write them in the database. So the database, looks like when you do a query of the database for this machine, you'll see a list of rows with CPERs, and then you'll see CPADs. Okay, now let's say I get a new analyzer, and I might have had some CPERs that were older that weren't part of that because they were from 6 months ago, and I wasn't looking 6 months back. Now let's say I get a new analyzer, and I want to replace some things and see if it works. The new analyzer says, hey, I want 6 months worth of data, not 90 days. So then what we do is we query whatever database we have for the last X months of data, pass it to the analyzer, and we may get a new CPAD that was different because the analyzer was improved. But it is completely traceable if you write the CPAD as an entry in the same database where you're tracking your CPERs.
I see. Okay, so the other thing I was worried about was like, if you took a CPAD action, then how do you know what led up to that? But I guess you could always replay it and then find out what that was.
It should be imminently replayable. Yes.
I think one caveat in this flow is like you don't wait for 90 days for some
No,
type
you
of
always
error.
take the newest one and you run the newest one through the analyzer. But you look back in time as needed.
Yeah, I think for correctable errors it makes sense, not for other.
No, Rama, I can give you examples. In fact, I think Charlie even put some in. Uh, so if I have let's say that I have a fatal error, like a crash dump, I might have had a corrected error in an SRAM a month ago that was relevant. Time series, we should never assume that time series is inappropriate. We should just be able to pass however many CPERs the analyzer asks, and there's a decent chance that the old ones will be valuable.
Let me give you this example, right? When a customer have experienced a fatal error, right? First is like you need to repair that node immediately. Okay. On a fatal error, okay, when you get a fatal error, you're deciding which fruit to be replaced. Okay. While deciding the fruit, some may give direct location, hey, go and replace dim one, right? Okay. Like in those cases, you don't need like, hey, I want to analyze like 30 days of data, 90 days of data.
You don't know? Okay, yeah. Let me give you a counterpoint to exactly. This is perfect. Thank you, Rama. This is a great example. So we had a transaction level timeout. Okay, well, that transaction level timeout might have been because of a PCIe problem that caused back pressure. It might have been because something wedged in the mesh that interconnects things in the chip. I don't really know what it is. But if I say I got a crash dump, I wonder if there are any other related errors. I might see that I was having errors in the mesh previously. And now all of a sudden, I have way more confidence that I do need to replace the socket because I saw some mesh problems that look like they might be related, but were either retried and passed or were corrected. I assure you that we need to correlate the two.
Yeah, no, yeah, I didn't finish my thought. Okay. Okay, there are like different type of scenarios, right? One is like where you identify that the error coming from CPU or DIM. In some cases, you don't know, right?
But when you're doing the analysis, the whole point is that you don't know. So
Yeah.
you pass the time series in and you use the time series if you need it. And so we should always be able to pass time series for all classes of errors. It's just you may or may not use it depending on the error. But we don't know that by ahead of time. Only the analyzer knows that based on the last error that it got.
Yeah. Like I think before deciding, you need to process the logs, right? Coming up with a common analyzer, I think, yeah, that need to be worked through silicon vendors, platform vendors, and all
Yeah,
that.
but this strategy works for all, like it's not, this isn't tuned to any one class of errors, Rama. It's tuned for all, it will work for any
All
severity.
right. Yeah, Rama, what do you mean common analyzer?
Let's say you see voltage issues or temperature issues, right? Okay. Silicon vendor will be focusing on a silicon vendor can give a common analyzer where, oh, you can go and look at all the memory logs, okay, correctable error logs, recoverable logs to identify the component, right? You cannot provide for analyzing all type of logs. You need to have thermal conditions comes from platform. You need to have the analyzer should be different parts. One from silicon vendor, he understands his failures.
Yeah.
Other platform things.
Yeah, I'll just say that's the job of the fleet policies, right? Like if there are multiple analyzers associated with a node, the fleet policies can look at the outputs of all of them, right?
And so you may have a clock power thermal analyzer, and I didn't mean to draw it in the middle of the CPAL line, but what you would do is you'd say, hey, the CPU is telling me it looks a little flaky, but then I go, hold on, the voltage, the voltage sequencer supplying that board said that there was an anomaly in power. And so what we would have to do in our policies is go, clock power thermal errors take precedence over the other ones. And we have the same problem if you have, let's say, a PCIe link. You could have a GPU and an SoC on both sides of the link see a problem simultaneously, and they may come to different conclusions. And so, we're just going to have to develop policies to weigh which one. But that in no way restricts us from wanting to do time series analysis in each analyzer.
Yeah. That's how the current flows are like. There is a priority list. If you see thermal problems, okay, you give the precedence over it. It requires a combination of parameters. That's what I meant. If somebody thinking one master analyzer silicon vendor provides, that is not the case.
Well, it's one analyzer per silicon. That's the key. So an Intel, or actually not even per silicon, it's one analyzer. Really, it should be one. I mean, I could see Intel, for instance, giving an analyzer that covered their SoCs, their NICs, and their GPUs, right? They could do all of them in one analyzer. We don't care. It'll just say, I recognize these CPERs, send them to me. There's no harm in that. And that analyzer may come up with multiple conclusions, and we'll have to sort those out if that's the case.
Maybe I don't know who is there from. I will ask a comment. One analyzer for CPU, GPU. I would love that, but yeah.
No, so Drew, but
No,
how
there's
will
nothing
the
fundamentally
CPAL, attaching the CPAL to CPAL help, right? Because on the vendor side, if I'm thinking of it, once I send out the CPAL, I'm done. I don't keep any history. It's like, because I need to keep record of additional error records, right? So if you send this optional CPAL back along with the CPAD, I mean, it's really something that we cannot correlate. On analyzer side, like you keep track of those, right? So that makes sense. But sending it back along with the CPAD, it's I know we called it optional last time, but it's still not making
I'm
sense
with
to
you.
me.
I'm arguing the same thing you are. Yes.
Yeah. So I agree with it. But additionally, or even if it is optional, like if we keep it as optional, can CPU refuse to support it? Because I may not have bandwidth to accept any CPER along with the CPAD, right? I may have smaller buffers, so I don't want to accept
I
those.
think that I just this was a discussion, that we had and we haven't bottomed out on. I'm okay if we just had a list of GUIDs for the CPERs in the log. I'm somewhat opposed to sending the CPERs back.
And I think the main point here was, it's all well and good to have automatable things. At some level, when there's an action taken, you want some trace, and this is partly what Anil was saying too, of why that action got recommended, right? And usually that action is going to be recommended based on one or more CPERs, right? And not the name of the failure, but why did that conclusion occur, right? So if something is wrong, as in this system isn't working, or the repairs aren't helping, or whatever, right? You can look at the thing and say, oh, look, I got, whatever, I detected a row fault and I have these 4 CPERs and it turns out one of them's in a different row. Clearly I did the wrong thing. Now I got to go understand why, right?
But then that is additional analysis, right? Then
no,
we need that intelligence inside the...
It's manual work, but the problem is, right, what you're going to get is Drew's going to come in and say, hey, Shibata, or hey, Vilas, you're doing all these repairs and they're not working. Here's a couple of CPADs, go figure it out, right? And then we don't know why, right?
Well, I think what we would do is we'd query our database and go, here are some CPADs that looked wrong. Here's the error history of some of the machines.
Right, but that's where Anil has a reasonable point. Like correlating why the analyzer, what specific series of things the analyzer saw to get to a CPAD becomes a difficult thing. Anyway,
that doesn't have to be in the CPAD. That's in the database. That's in the analyzer.
Yeah. So
if you're not keeping, if you're not leaving footprints, you're not doing your job.
No. The analyzer is totally stateless. Just be very, very careful of that.
We're agreeing with you, Vilas, but the point is the database has rows. It has a CPER, maybe that weren't used by the analyzer, and then it has the CPERs that were sent to the analyzer, and then it has the CPAD that was
So that's fine. If what you're saying,
I give you this, and you've got the whole history.
If keeping the full history of everything is the MDC's responsibility, then that's fine. Okay, but it has to be very explicit, not in the analyzer, right?
Yeah.
So just to be clear, maybe I'm wrong here. The way, yes, we do keep the history of every record, but I think the way, Drew, you're listing this, I am not sure we do the same way. So the way, at least that I know right now, is so think about every CPER turns into a table, okay, with one row and multiple columns, and each column has a field, whatever CPER has. Okay.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm.
Let me finish it. Okay, right. And then when the analysis happens, right, on the same row, there is another column added, which is actually the analysis part. Okay, so that when our next level of tooling comes in and say, I need to now somebody has told me to take an action. Let me go and read the record and figure out what's the next step is going to be. Okay,
you could do that.
That all stays with the one row.
Well, you could if like let's say that we took 3 CPERs and we analyzed it and generated a CPAD. Then if you wanted to, in this case, in your database, you could do this, and you could just have a place. Whoops.
That's exactly the problem happens to join. If I want to join CPER with CPAD, right? If I have to do it on my own, like some post-processing, the timestamp and all becomes very complex. In a large scale that we work on, right? It's not that easy. It works a lot of time, but when the shit hit the fan, right, it doesn't work.
So that's a little puzzling. Sure, okay, I believe you. That's a little puzzling to me because keeping the order of things you got from something is pretty basic. It's not that hard, even at scale.
Yeah, I mean, anything that we can think of not hard, and then you work at scale, right? It becomes hard. So to keep it simple, we just keep everything in one record, and that's why there is called big table, right? The hundreds of thousands of columns. We can add one more column. I mean, if you have 1,000 columns, we can add one more column. No, that's easy for us.
I don't think so. I think I think that there's a simpler thing. Is if these CPERs have GUIDs, you could embed the GUIDs. You just have a list of GUIDs, and the CPAD that referred to the 3 CPERs that it used.
Yeah,
So
basically you're saying there's one more step required to do that, right? Joining. And I'm thinking that if there's any way we can avoid that.
well, no. The problem is that we're going to send this back to the machine, and I'm going to repeat myself, but if I have a 10 gigabyte or 10 megabyte CPER, I don't want to send it back to the machine. That's going to mean that the BMC has to buffer
No, you're
9.99
making
megabytes it didn't need.
you're making some assumption which is not true. When I send the repair action to the machine, I don't have to send the whole row worth of data to the machine, right? I can choose only one column. Go back to your the CPER, the table, right? I'm referring there, right? What you're saying is that when I want to send back, let's say this CPAD data becomes a column to every CPER, right? And most of the time, CPER may not have that CPAD will be, the column will be undiagnosed or no diagnosed. It's a blank. And then some CPERs will have a valid data saying, oh, replace them or replace CPU or do something, right?
So
Now,
Anil, who is generating that additional column? Which entity?
that's exactly what I was earlier pointing out, that as a result of this analysis, okay, because my input is CPER, right? After analysis, I append that CPER with this additional column or the field, right, with the output.
Yeah. So the assumption I think there is that you're keeping a track of, you have a state of where you have a record of all the past CPERs, and when a new CPER comes, you know the past history, and like your example, you found a correlation on a specific CPER record, then you will append a column. Oh, now I'm able to diagnose.
That's it.
So now that's the proof.
And I guess I'm not that sympathetic, Anil, because that is really not the supplier's problem. That's our problem. And so if you want to make a database that looks like this, I don't care. It's your problem. If someone else wants to make a database with a different row for the CPAD, don't care. Again, not my problem. If you
have a problem, because how do you correlate? That's exactly what you're just talking about, right?
But I don't. It's not that hard. It's just like It is not. If a hyperscaler can't make a time series database for a machine, then they don't.
Time series is there, right, Drew?
They
Time
do
series
not
is not a
belong in
problem.
business if they cannot do that.
Well, Drew,
it
is tricky also if there are multiple components involved. Let's say you have different CPERs coming through GPU, envisage, and your CPU, and you're trying to do it at a data center level in the infrastructure, correlate the timestamps. It's very tricky.
Well, I'm not saying correlate the timestamps. I'm just saying strictly if you just order them. So I could have G3 be a GPU CPER, right? And I'm not going to send that to this analyzer because it's something different. But my point is that the database that I can track that I got them and say that this machine sent these CPERs in this order. I'm done.
Your CPAD should have CPAD should have information that, okay, these are the CPER record I looked at, and the output came from this CPER record. You should have at least that level of information in CPAD. If you don't, there's no way I can backtrack.
The analyzer could put that out, and you could capture that. Sure, I'm fine. I'm absolutely fine with that. But what I'm not fine with is telling Intel and AMD that it's their problem to figure out how to store it in a database for us. That just doesn't make any sense. So so that we can put that as a requirement that when we generate a CPAD that somehow the analyzer tells us a list of what it does, and it could be that they give us another piece of data that isn't even in the CPAD that we just store with the CPAD, and that tells us what CPERs went into it. That's fine. I don't really care. That's great. I'm just opposed to making someone else solve our database problem.
Yeah. I think in the other you have the second subreddit, GUIDs of the maybe called of the CPER, right? I mean,
yeah, I think
at the very least, if you can have GPIDs of the CPER associated with that CPAD output,
and
then I will be at peace.
Well, maybe this is a separate output. So, my point is, like let's think about I don't see decoded data here, but we often want decoded data. So that would also probably be separate because I don't, again, want to send a 10 megabyte, it's going to be even bigger once it's decoded back to the BMC. So the analyzer may put out other things. And if it listed all the CPERs that it used to generate this output, that's cool. And you can store that. And it came out at the same time the CPAD did. And by golly, just write that to the database. So, you got
Yeah.
it in the same
If
call to the analyzer, right?
Yeah, if I can have the GUIDs of all the CPER that CPAD analyzed and put an output, then I can take those records and update this additional column with the CPAD output for those
Sure.
GUIDs, right?
Okay, I'm happy with that.
I mean,
And
it is still post-processing, which my team will hate to do that, but at least I can.
but it's very
share.
regular.
Yeah, I think those are like implementation specific from vendor to vendor, whether how to catch it post processing, and also I think this is not a simple. There is a other scenario I'll tell you. The latencies we are thinking all say error happened, all the analyzer output is there, like node is sitting. The pipeline analyzer is like we are thinking all in microseconds or like minutes. Uh, that that may not be the cases in all scenarios. And
Well,
the
I mean,
pipeline
it's super common.
reliability, yeah.
Yeah, maybe people are batch processing, but that doesn't really matter if it's, I guess I don't understand that because if it's there's no, if you look at this, the only notion of time is how many days back you go. But let's say you batch process every 4 hours, I get this CPER 4 hours later, I'm ready to do my batch process. I'm gonna be like, hey, how many error logs did I have in the last 90 days? And, maybe one falls off because a teeny bit amount of time passed and I only get two because this one was, right at the edge of 90 days, but that shouldn't be a big deal. Shouldn't matter.
How many hours, like we are assuming that node will be sitting there waiting for all this analysis comeback action?
Well, I expect, so I'm not expecting to do batch processing. You could, I mean, it's really, so think of it this way. You get a CPER and the question is, well, the CPER is generated. Okay, I'm going back to the picture. The CPER is generated on the machine. And, let's say my dream comes true and the RAS API exposes it. So this pipeline, and I'll just say the out-of-band pipeline, could be fast or could be slow. It depends on the hyperscaler. If you want to do crash prediction, you want to do it fast because if you wait 4 hours and you have an analyzer that can predict a crash an hour ahead of time, then you kind of blew it. Your prediction was too late. But I don't think there is any assumption. I mean, if you could do it in order of minutes, you can predict crashes in a meaningful way and maybe avoid some.
Yeah, and I guess I just want to make your point, right? I think this is an interesting discussion, but it's really all out of scope for the CPAD, right?
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah, like the CPAD is very simple. It's the format of the stuff that goes along that green line.
I
Right?
think the
That's really
format
all it
of,
is.
I think the format of CPAD is relevant here because once we decide on format, right, then we don't want to keep changing it. And I don't know if I got this clearly in my mind. Maybe. So do I? You and I?
We haven't defined it yet here, right? We are
Yeah.
just identifying the areas where we need to define. But I think we have had some discussions whether this will be a part of the RAS API, because that's where we'll define the actual objects, right?
It's
Like
going to consume it. It's the consumer of
it's
a
a
Yeah, it's a
Exactly.
consumer. The requirement need to be defined somehow here, like
Yeah.
formatting and all that,
So,
right?
yeah, could be good to focus on what other content we need in the CPAD.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
I
so
agree with Vilas. I think it should be very like 1 or 2 page. Just say what content should go into CPAD. I think
That's right.
we're having
Yes.
Well,
good
that's what we're-
discussions. Yeah.
Yep, that's right.
yeah, and that's what we're trying to do here, but it should be pretty simple. It's really what you send back to the machine. And the analyzer is going, like I mentioned, decoded data. But the decoded data doesn't need to be sent back to the machine. We want it and we want to use it, but that's a different thing. The CPAD is just what goes back to the machine.
So Drew, this is where I'm again very confused. I think we are saying two things. We are saying send back to the machine, and we are also saying the CPAD output will go to the fleet policy decider or manager.
Well, it goes back to the machine, but through the fleet via fleet policy decider. You know,
And that's a very important distinction, by the way, because
it is, and Anil, if you look at every single drawing I've drawn, it always has fleet policy.
yeah, no, but I just heard you saying the output of CPAD will go to back to machine.
The machine is expecting information in CPAD format. It gets there through a decision by the fleet policy engine.
Now
That's
that is where I think I'm getting confused now, because
Why?
that is not the intent of CPAD. CPAD intent is to simplify the tooling,
Yes.
so that we get a consistent analysis output messages from across the
No,
different
and
type
so
of-
that you can send consistent data around your fleet.
you don't need CPAD for that, Will,
not?
I'm sorry. Because if analyzer is from vendor can put the analyzer output in any whatever binary coded data and send back to the your component, and that's done. Why we need another format then?
But how do you know what it is then? How do you make policy choices around what to do if it's just a binary block?
That's okay. I think anyway, we're out of time here. We need to. I'll set up some one-on-one with you, because I'm not really following this thought process now, because I thought it was a very interesting idea when we started, and the block diagram.
So Neil, think about why a CPER is useful. Think about why a CPER is useful, and then map that back to actions.
I understand Vilas that point. Right? That's exactly what I'm getting there, right? But I think we are getting confused here. At least I'm getting confused.
No, we aren't. We just okay. Maybe you're confused, but I don't think this is I don't understand the confusion. I need your help, because really what this is saying is that, gosh, it sure is hard to process the policy part too. So what we're doing is we're making it so that we see the things in this that we need to. They're defined in a way that we can apply the policies. So like the name or the identity of the error and its severity and the action suggested. You know, those may play into the policy.
Yeah, that is for our fleet policy, right? So the output of CPAD is going to our fleet infrastructure. It's not going directly to the machine.
But no one has said that.
No one has said that. Yeah,
I heard that it goes directly to the machine.
No.
One possible output, one possible result of the fleet policies is to send that CPAD back to the machine, right? Another possible output of the fleet policies is to send the CPAD over to someone because the CPAD says retorque the CPU, right? But another possible output of the fleet policy is I'm not going to send this CPAD anywhere because I think it's garbage, right? But the point is, it's a common data format for data exchange, right? Across all of these different entities.
Okay, so if we align with that, because I'm getting tested, I think, then anyway, we are out of time right now. Drew, I set up one-on-one with you. I want to really think with you, because I'm still not very clear now.
I mean, but I don't. Okay, I'm really struggling here, Anil, because this is.
Now, this block diagram makes sense to me, but what I'm hearing is something not aligning with the block diagram.
You're hearing everything we're saying is aligned with this drawing. So if when we talk, help me understand anything I've said, because we say that the RAS API is the consumer and that's for live actions, right? And that's fine. It is the consumer. Now it goes when I say that I'm driving to dinner and I'm going to let's say In-N-Out. I don't list every road that I'm taking, and so if I say I'm sending a CPAL to the machine, I'm not listing every connection. There may even be some more things. There may be a rate limiter you want to put in here. I don't care. I'm not specifying.
Yeah, anything trivial is okay, but if something is very important, then we need to call that out, right? And I think we're calling out in the block diagram, but when I hearing, I hear that output analyzer goes back to the machine.
Through fleet policies, always through fleet policies. It's always in every drawing I've ever drawn. And if you ask me, does the CSP need to apply their policy to an action? I will 100% always tell you yes.
Right. So I think we are out of time right now. Anyway, I have certain time. I really want to understand a few more things here.
Anil, you can just think of SMM, right? Like just imagine that today the analysis is being done by SMM and it is immediately taking the action within the SOC itself. Now you're taking that part outside and that action format is being standardized, right? Like it was just very close to the hardware today, and now you're pulling it out because you want to have better policies.
So
Right?
that is also another 1 hour discussion. This
Yeah,
is a this is a lot. This is
no,
a
I was trying to give you example of like why action is a we've been doing that already. It's just that we are formalizing and creating a standardized
so we are
format
not
for that
replacing
action.
we're not replacing the short what do you call fast path loop versus long path loop or
This has
nonlinear
nothing to do with that. I mean, you can do this as fast or as slow as you want to. It's just on how fast you analyze it and how fast you decide to act on it. So
I think this would be good for offline discussion, maybe.
I think it's
we're
offline
rat
discussion.
holing, and this is getting me a little fired up. So
Yeah.
let's talk offline.
Yeah, I put some time with you, Drew. Okay.
Okay, sounds good. We can get this sorted out. Thank you. Thank
Good
you.
discussion. Bye.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Talk to y'all later.
Bye.
Yeah. Have a
Bye.
good weekend.